I'm watching something unfold that could shatter the European Commission's credibility in ways we haven't seen since the Pfizer text message scandal. Just 43 seconds ago, a leaked diplomatic cable from the Russian Foreign Ministry landed on my desk, and what it reveals about Ursula von der Leyen's behind-the-scenes negotiations is nothing short of explosive. The document, timestamped February 28th at 14:37 Moscow time, contains direct quotes from a classified meeting between EU energy negotiators and Russian officials. And here's where it gets terrifying. Russia is now publicly threatening to release the full transcripts of conversations that allegedly show von der Leyen personally approving $8.7 billion in energy payments that directly contradicted her own public statements about cutting ties with Russian gas. I've spent the last 6 hours cross-referencing these claims with EU budget documents, and the numbers are starting to line up in ways that should terrify every European taxpayer. We're not talking about administrative errors, we're talking about a systematic pattern of saying one thing to Parliament and doing the exact opposite in closed-door meetings. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, didn't hold back during this morning's press briefing. She stood at that podium with a folder marked Brussels Protocols and explicitly stated that the European Commission has been maintaining secret energy channels while publicly championing sanctions. She mentioned specific dates: September 14th, October 3rd, and November 22nd of last year. 3 separate occasions where EU officials allegedly negotiated long-term gas contracts through intermediary companies based in Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. What makes this particularly damaging is the timing. Von der Leyen has spent the last 18 months positioning herself as the architect of Europe's energy independence. She stood in front of the cameras, declared that every euro sent to Russia was funding the war machine, and promised that the EU would never again be held hostage by Moscow's gas supplies. The rhetoric was powerful. The imagery was compelling. European citizens believed they were making sacrifices for a principled stand, but now Russia is saying that while von der Leyen was delivering those speeches, her own negotiators were locking in contracts worth billions. I'm looking at a breakdown that shows $2.1 billion in November alone routed through a Turkish energy firm called Meridian Gas Holdings. The company's ownership structure is deliberately opaque, but financial investigators have traced 67% of its shares back to Gazprom subsidiaries. The markets are already reacting. The euro dropped 0.6% against the dollar within minutes of Zakharova's statement hitting the news wires. Energy stocks across Europe are in freefall. Traders know what this means. If Russia follows through and releases the full documentation, von der Leyen's position becomes untenable. And if she falls, the entire College of Commissioners could collapse with her. I've reached out to sources inside the Berlaymont building, and the panic is palpable. Press officers are refusing to comment. Scheduled briefings have been mysteriously canceled. One senior official, speaking on condition of absolute anonymity, told me that the Commission's legal team has been in emergency sessions since dawn, trying to determine if there's any way to block the release of these documents under diplomatic privilege. But here's the problem. Russia doesn't care about European legal frameworks. They're playing a different game entirely. By dangling this information publicly, they're forcing von der Leyen into an impossible position. If she denies the allegations without providing counter-evidence, she looks defensive and potentially dishonest. If she admits that energy payments continued but claims they were legally necessary, she destroys her own credibility on sanctions policy. And if she stays silent, the narrative gets written by Moscow. The implications stretch far beyond von der Leyen personally. Member states are already questioning whether they've been misled about the extent of ongoing Russian energy dependence. Germany, which shut down its nuclear plants based partly on assurances of diversified energy sources, is now facing the possibility that those assurances were built on continued Russian gas flows that were simply better hidden. I'm tracking social media reactions across Europe, and the anger is visceral. Von der Leyen lied is trending in 7 languages. citizens who accepted higher heating bills, who supported expensive green transition policies, who believed they were part of a moral stand against aggression, are now confronting the possibility that they were played. The betrayal isn't just political, it's personal. Russian state media is amplifying every angle of this story with surgical precision. RT and Sputnik are running 24-hour coverage, framing it as proof of Western hypocrisy. The narrative they're pushing is devastatingly simple. European leaders lecture the world about values while secretly maintaining the exact same corrupt relationships they publicly condemn. And the worst part? With each hour that passes without a credible EU response, that narrative gains strength. What's keeping me up is the strategic calculation behind Russia's timing. Why now? Why release this information at this particular moment? The answer becomes clear when you look at the broader geopolitical landscape. Ukraine is entering a critical phase of negotiations. European unity on continued military support is already fragile. If Moscow can destabilize the Commission's leadership right now, they create chaos precisely when the West needs coordination most. I've obtained analysis from 3 independent energy economists, and they all reach the same conclusion. If the Russian allegations are even partially accurate, it means the EU's entire sanctions architecture has been compromised from the top. We're not just talking about embarrassment, we're talking about the systematic undermining of the West's primary leverage tool against Moscow. The pressure on von der Leyen is now coming from multiple directions simultaneously. The European Parliament's Budget Committee has announced an emergency hearing. The European Public Prosecutor's Office has reportedly begun preliminary inquiries. Member state capitals are demanding answers, and Russia sits back, watching the chaos unfold, holding the threat of full document release like a sword over Brussels. I spoke with a former Commission official who worked on energy policy until last year. He told me something chilling. The problem isn't whether she approved payments. The problem is that if she did, it means the entire institutional framework lied to citizens for strategic reasons. And if institutions lie about this, what else have they lied about? That's the real crisis. Trust, once broken at this level, doesn't come back. Von der Leyen has built her career on projecting strength and moral clarity. She survived the Pfizer scandal through a combination of stonewalling and institutional protection. But this feels different. Russia has learned from watching how Brussels operates. They know that the EU's bureaucratic complexity can be weaponized. They know that forcing transparency on selective issues can paralyze the entire system. The countdown has begun. Moscow has given what they're calling a reasonable period for the Commission to provide its own accounting of energy transactions before they release what they claim is documentary proof of systematic deception. We don't know exactly how long that period is, but diplomatic observers estimate it could be as short as 72 hours. I'm now receiving reports from inside the European Parliament that several member state representatives are preparing no-confidence motions. Politicians who defended von der Leyen during previous controversies are now calculating whether their own careers can survive being associated with what might become the biggest institutional scandal in EU history. The financial exposure is staggering. If these contracts were indeed approved at the Commission level while public statements claimed otherwise, we're looking at potential fraud charges involving $8.7 billion in taxpayer money. That's not a rounding error, that's a number large enough to fund entire national healthcare systems. And if Russian documentation proves that Commission officials knowingly misled Parliament about the destination and purpose of these funds, the legal consequences could extend well beyond political resignation. What's particularly damaging is the specificity of Russia's claims. They're not making vague allegations. They're citing transaction codes, bank routing numbers, specific meeting locations, and named intermediaries. This level of detail suggests they either have genuine documentation or they've constructed an incredibly sophisticated forgery designed to be nearly impossible to disprove. I've been analyzing the communication patterns from Brussels over the past 6 hours, and the silence is deafening. Normally, when faced with Russian disinformation campaigns, the EU's response is swift and coordinated. But today, nothing. The institutional machinery that usually springs into defensive action has gone completely dark. This silence is being interpreted in capitals across Europe as confirmation. If the allegations were baseless, the response would be immediate and aggressive. The fact that we're seeing delay and confusion suggests that officials are confronting uncomfortable truths they can't easily explain away. The green energy transition, which von der Leyen championed as her signature achievement, is now under intense scrutiny. If European citizens were told to accept higher costs and reduced reliability in the name of cutting Russian dependence, but the dependence never actually ended and was simply hidden through financial engineering, the political backlash will be unprecedented. We're talking about protests, electoral consequences, and possibly the collapse of centrist political coalitions that backed these policies. Intelligence agencies across NATO are now reportedly investigating whether these alleged secret channels represented security vulnerabilities. If the Commission was maintaining undisclosed communication lines with Russian entities, what other information might have flowed through those channels? Did Russia gain leverage over EU decision-making? These questions are being asked at the highest levels of Western security apparatus. Von der Leyen's team finally released a brief statement 20 minutes ago. It says, the Commission categorically rejects unfounded allegations from hostile foreign actors and commits to full transparency in due course. But notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't deny the specific transactions. It doesn't provide alternative documentation. It doesn't explain the Turkish intermediary companies. It's a holding statement designed to buy time, and everyone knows it. The markets are not buying it. European energy stocks continued their slide through afternoon trading. Investors are pricing in institutional chaos, regulatory uncertainty, and the possibility of a complete leadership change in Brussels. Russia's strategic objective here is becoming clearer with each passing hour. They don't necessarily need to prove every detail of their allegations. They just need to create enough doubt, enough confusion, enough internal European conflict to paralyze decision-making at a critical moment. And judging by the chaos I'm witnessing in real time, that objective is being achieved. Every hour von der Leyen remains silent, the pressure multiplies. Every statement from Russian officials adds another layer of detail that demands response. The political quicksand is deepening, and right now, I'm watching the president of the European Commission struggle to find solid ground. This isn't just another scandal that will blow over with the next news cycle. This is the kind of crisis that ends careers and reshapes institutions, and we're only at the beginning.